explosion. Supposing I make a flush of these against those things, you see from the center, all this spray goes out. So way back at the beginning of time, maybe according to Fred Hoyle, there was a colossal explosion which blew out all the galaxies. And as the explosion goes out, the spray gets finer and finer and finer and finer, and you look at it as all one thing. It's reaching out like you would spread your fingers like that, and you, every one of you, a little reach out on the end of that big explosion. You go right back to the beginning. Your bodies are the most ancient things that there are. So, like that. It takes millions of years to make fly. But you're in it right there. You did it right at the beginning. Everything happens to itself. It's a very interesting experiment. Let sound come to your ears. Now why don't you try this? Why don't you all just close your eyes? And gently become aware of the whole world of sound. Don't try to identify the sound and put names on it. Just let them happen. Don't feel that you must make any sounds like belly rumble, hiccup, coughing, and so on. It's all perfectly part of the scene. Just for a moment, let all sound happen. Even when I talk, don't make any sense of what I'm saying. Just sound. Shut up! I can't hear myself thinking. But if you really know how to listen, you can concentrate on anything you want. But so in the same way, one could give experimental exercise in using your eyes, in tasting, in feeling things. For example, picking up rocks and feeling. Because all this is letting yourself function. Just in the same way as I was discussing yesterday, letting your brain give you answers. Because this is an act of faith in one's own being. It is allowing the body to be in democracy, shall we say, a republic, So when you allow the body, in other words, to do what it will do, then you say, well, it will do it for me. Well, it's now wait. Who are you? Just as the Tao itself is not something other than the universe. Not a gloss over it. You aren't something other than this design, which is not just the body, but the body and all its relationships. Stand apart, you don't have it. You're not in a situation where the kind of inspector, which is you, he watches everything that goes by, like he's watching the traffic go by on the street. But we think we are there. And indeed seem to have a positive sensation of being the object of what is all. Partly because of memory, which seems to give an impression that one is a static mirror which reflects everything that goes by. We get this from remembering. And on the other hand, we get it because we are trying to fight change and resist it. You see, we're resisting all the time. If you were physically aware of all your muscular reactions, you would find you were going around most of the day doing this, fighting something. You get a person to lie on the ground and say, now look, you're completely supported by the floor. You won't fall down, so let go. It's very difficult, because they're afraid that if they don't hold themselves together, they will turn into a nasty goo that will all fall apart and drip to the floor. So everybody is trying to use their skin and their muscles to hold themselves together, but that's all they get themselves to fall apart. So there's a constant resistance, and that resistance is experienced, you can be aware of it in terms of a sense of strain here between the eyes. This is its center. And that constant resistance to life and the sensation of it is what you actually feel about yourself. I am feeling. Now, if you let go, there is no necessity whatsoever for an inspection. You are what you experience. Your experience is you the same. Your thoughts are you, your feelings are you. So there's no necessity whatsoever to try and stand aside from them. You stand up. Go away. So, if you can trust yourself to the flow of what's going on, you won't need to. And you'll find it works very well, just as your eyes work well when you don't try to enforce it. Just as the flows are comfortable when you become aware of it. Now, this is the same as numbness. Quite different. Because you experience your body in terms of what you ordinarily call everything else. In other words, as you look around here, we are taught to think, what I am looking at is out there. Now imagine this is up. What's the color of your head from the standpoint of your own vision? Of your head. Yes. Nothing. Certainly isn't black, is it, behind your eyes? You don't have a sensation of blackness. Or of whiteness. There seems to be nothing there at all, as if you had no head from your own point of view. But actually, what it is, how it looks inside your head, is what you're seeing out here. Because you see, the optical nerves are back here. And your experience of all the shapes and colors around you is a sensation of the state of your brain. So what you're looking at is inside your head. But then you can't be said to be looking at it because inside your head is you. So all this is how you feel. This is you. Only it's true for each person. It's not more specially, you are not more specially me than I am you. It's mutual. It's like the dewdrops on the spider's web reflecting one another. So it is this, then, this letting your mind work by itself, letting your eyes see for themselves, that is the preliminary to naturalism in the way that Darwinists understand it. Now, let's go on and see how they express naturalism. They use two images. One is called the uncarved block, and the other unbleached. And these two images lie at the root of all those great art forms of the Far East that are associated with Darwinism and Darwinism. And I'm going to show you the ceremony of that wonderful illustration of this particular because it's divine. It is what you might call the art of the slow action. Because it combines the point of the uncarved block. You know, there's a Japanese art called bonsai, which is the cultivation of stone. You might call it the art of growing stone. Japanese natural animals, as they are in for a reign of 1,000 years, reign 10,000 years. Stone grows in the mighty rock, big velvet inclination. So there's the idea, first of all, that a stone is alive. Next, there is a love of stones in their natural shape. I have a huge series of slides that I took in Japan of nothing but stones in gardens. And they have a genius for the selection of marvelous stones. They like stones which you will find in a river, which have been worked on in the water until they look almost like clouds. They'll take one of these stones and get it up on the fuel car and bring it down. Then instead of just dumping it in the garden, catching it on it, they'll take it away to a corner where it is a dam and grows naturally. In Japan, moss grows quite quickly, naturally. When the moss has grown naturally on the stone, they move it into the place where they wanted it exactly to start. Then they arrange sand around it in such a way that it looks as if it's always been. You cannot, you see, there is nothing that's not natural. Nothing at all. The idea that there is something artificial is a completely artificial idea. Because the skyscraper is really as natural as a bird's nest. But how to demonstrate naturalism? It's like what is called in mathematics an asymptotic curve. That is a curve that approaches the axis of a straight line. A straight line. Now, in a curve, there is a straight line. It's always getting nearer, but never. What we call approximation. So the idea is to make a skillful approximation to natural. But if it were just natural and only natural, it wouldn't call attention to what it's doing. It wouldn't point it out. And so the idea of the art is when you make a mold or select the rock and say mold against mold, rock against rock. great masters of Taoism are got their minds uncluttered. They suddenly discover that some of the simplest things of everyday life, simple utensils to be used, the cheapest rice bowls might be used by a peasant, or even a clock. They were unsophisticated. It's natural. The same sense we have when a child
There is a bowl, we shall see some, which is definitely handmade.
about the truth. And the bottom of the bowl of clay is empty. But you see, that coloration reminds these artists of wood. And they want to see that it is clay, because a good potter does not force the clay to obey his preconceived ideas. He evokes the spirit in the clay to do some magic. So then, because the clay did that, these artists love the clay. They don't want to make the clay look like something else, like ivory. They want it to look like clay. So with clothes, these clothes, so with everything, wood. Wood is loved by such artists. They love the grain in wood, and therefore deplore paint. Lacquer, some things is very. By and large, wood is beautiful. You get a floor like this, you see. Well, the nice thing about this floor is you can see it's wood. You can see the grain. Some of you may have been to the Council of Town in June, where they have verandas. Gorgeous grain wood it's shiny. It's like looking at some vision. By the edge of the alcove, called the tokonoma, there is almost invariably a wooden pillar, which is made from an plate finger or a wheel, so that you still see the knots in it and the curve, and sometimes they get, I think, rather exaggerated, absurd bit numbers. But in the same way that we today have learned to like driftwood, that is a big in line with the Taoist spirit. Yeah. Appreciate wood as wood, but don't try to make it look like marble or metal or something else. The same is true with paper. The Chinese don't like our paper. They say it has no character. They like paper with threads, texture, and they feel that that really is paper. Paper gets the paper, and so feel that our paper is something fantastic, a non-substance, and we're in danger of being engulfed through not having love for the uncarved product. Fanciers of swords could never make up their minds which of the two was better. Certainly they were the unquestionable masters. So a group of samurai one day thought, we've got to put this to the test. We think that probably Mr. Matsushima is tops, but Mr. Yamaguchi comes so close. So they took a sword by each master, and they went to a stream. And they first of all took Mr. Yamaguchi's sword, and they dipped it in the stream with the edge facing upstream. And they set a piece of paper floating downstream. And as it came to the sword simply, without being moved, the paper divided itself down the blade, joined together, and flowed down. You know, that's a hard act to follow. Anyway, they took Mr. Matsushima's sword and dipped that in the stream, and likewise set a piece of paper floating towards it. And what do you suppose happened? Just as the piece of paper approached the edge of the sword, it moved to one side, avoided it, then went back into course and continued. And so obviously Mr. Matsushima was the better of the two swordsmiths. Why?
because the highest accomplishment in fencing is called the no-sword school. To be so good at fencing that you never have to use a sword. And there are all kinds of marvelous tales about great samurai trained in Zen and swordsmanship who never had to use a sword. You may have seen a movie called Samurai, which comes in 3 parts. It takes you 3 evenings to see it. And it's the life of Miyamoto Musashi, who was one of the greatest swordsmen in all Japanese history. It doesn't follow his life all the way through. It only comes to the point where he had a duel with another champion who insisted on challenging him out of vanity. And how Musashi takes him on, fighting him at first only with an oar that has had the blade chopped off. And but he maneuvers him into a position on the beach where the rising sun dazzles his opponent. And when his opponent makes a terrific swipe at him, he jumps over the sword, draws his own sword, and kills him instantly. But after that, he is very unhappy that he had to kill such a swordsman. And finally, he takes the advice of the Zen master Takuan, who's all along been trying to dissuade him from a military career. So sometime later, he was on his way to Kyoto, and this meant that he had to cross Lake Biwa in a ferry boat, small ferry boat that was rowed. And when he was on board, another samurai, who was a very vulgar fellow, who had had too much sake to drink, came aboard and saw Musashi. He said, what school of swordsmanship do you belong to? Musashi said, the no-sword school. By this time, the boat had started. No-sword school. I'd like to see your no-sword school. And this drunk drew his sword. And Musashi said, now, wait a minute. Said, this is a crowded boat. And if we start a duel, people will get hurt, and they're just innocent bystanders. He said, let's go to that island over there, and we can fight it out. So he said to the ferryman, over to that island. And he changed the course of the boat and went to the island. And this drunken swordsman was so eager to get out and fight that he jumped onto the sand. And immediately Musashi took the ferryman's oar and pushed the boat back. Left him there, and he said, you see my no-sword school. So if I say to you, hi, you say, hi. If I say, how are you? You say, fine. There you are, see? There's your original self. But if I should say in the middle of a conversation, you fine? Where have you been lately? Oh, I went to Mexico for a trip. Where did you go? Oh, I went to Acapulco. Did you enjoy yourself there? Not so bad. Why is my hand like Buddha's hand? How do you handle that one? And a master in such a situation said to, when his disciple blocked, he said to him, so far your answers have been quite natural and easy. Why do you feel some obstruction when I ask you about my hand being like Buddha's hand? Which in other words indicates, use your brains. And he won't, you see, because he's used to linear thinking. He's used to keeping on one track. Now this, you notice, you see, we're all on this. And therefore, when there's a conversation going on, we are uncomfortable if somebody changes the subject without ritual preparation. We are likewise uncomfortable when we're in the presence of crazy people who might change the subject altogether too abruptly. And same way with drunks who may not observe the amenities of etiquette in their conversation. We're all hung up on these tracks, which is to have a one-track mind. You can't jump. When the hands are clapped, the sound issues without hesitation. When flint is struck with steel, the spark comes out at once. But he goes on to explain that in such a situation, you must not be in a hurry, because that itself would be a block. And blocking, in this sense of the word, is exactly what the Buddhists mean by attachment. When they say, have no worldly attachment, it doesn't mean that you're to give up enjoying your dinner. It means giving up blocking, getting beyond the state where your flow is interrupted, and so proceeds jerkily, as if the wheel were made too tight for the axle. So we would quite correctly translate attachment with the American slang equivalent, hang up. So it is the hang up, therefore, the attempt to arrive at the solution to a problem demanding immediate action by reasoning, by calculation, which must take us along the linear path, whereas the event itself lies in a non-linear dimension. Never solve it that way. So also, with the curious property we call beauty, or for that matter, virtue in human behavior. We know very well when we are in the presence of forced virtue. So this happens. Once upon a time, the great tea master Rikyu went to a tea ceremony, and the host was very, very proud of a new tea caddy that he had bought, made of pottery. And Rikyu didn't notice it. At least so he thought. Which showed, because he was looking for it to be noticed, that he wasn't quite on to the philosophy of tea. I had a friend, Japanese artist, who one day did a calligraphy for me. He took an ordinary small Western house painter's brush, about an inch wide, and he did the Chinese characters for 1, 2, 3. That's one stroke. These are all horizontal strokes, 2 strokes, 3 strokes. And there was something just fantastic about this. The brush, you see, was partly sometimes dry, so that you've got hairlines instead of solid black. It so happened that a few days later we were due to receive a visit from Dr. Suzuki, the great Zen scholar. And I said, I'm going to hang that picture in my office. And the artist said, I hope he won't notice it. Which is because a fine work of art must so fit its surroundings as not to stand out like a sore thumb. So in this way, Rikyu didn't notice the tea caddy. But this so bothered the owner that after the ceremony was over, he smashed it. However, one of his students knew that it was very valuable, and he collected all the pieces. And then he had them restored by putting molten gold as their cement. This is an old technique. And so when it is finished, you see the original piece with all these spidery lines of gold across it. Sometime later, a son of the host brought out this mended tea caddy when Rikyu was having tea. And he said, "You know, that is most remarkable. When I saw that before, it was good, but now it's perfect." This is what one would call a controlled accident. And all great art is a controlled accident. That is to say, it has in it the component of control, but it also has the component of the accident and of the natural. And it's getting those two together that is the marvelous thing. It's the same in human relationships. Let's take the relationship of love. If I am in love with a woman whom I can control, she may have a flawless body, beautiful behavior. But if I control her completely, I might as well have a plastic doll. Only if she has a little mole on her cheek, or something like that, or some kind of unpredictability of character, then I know she's human, because the accidental has been introduced into the domain of the orderly. So likewise, when you go into a person's house and everything is spotless, everything in its place, you feel, my God, if you smoke a cigarette, you'll make the ashtray dirty. No, it's just that terrible. It has not got a quality which in Arabic is called baraka. Now, baraka means grace, roughly. But baraka is a quality when you say of someone, he fits like an old shoe. Or you've got a favorite saucepan that's old and dirty, but it's marvelous. Or an old pipe that you smoked, see? Where it's become very suited to you. It has baraka, grace. So the puzzle for every artist is how to get grace to strike. How to let an accident happen. Well, once upon a time there was a sculpture contest at the University of Chicago. No, it was at the Chicago Art Institute. And the competition was that every entrant was given a cubic foot of plaster of Paris. Do something with it. Now, the competition was won by a woman, and she started out by looking at that piece of plaster of Paris and said, "This thing is so perfect that it doesn't know what it wants to be." And so she grabbed it in both hands and flung it on the floor. Then pieces were chipped off and it was cracked and so on. And then she looked at it again. And she said, "Now I know what it wants to do." And so by following the grain which she had introduced into that, she made something beautiful. Now, following the grain is what you do when you do a Rorschach test. You see this blotchy thing, which is the Tao, which is the primordial wiggly universe. And then you see something in it. You see an image in it. And you see a far more beautiful image than you can ever draw by what we call eidetic vision. And you assist the piece of wood or stone or whatever it is in which you see that image to do its thing. Now experiment with yourselves in this. Look especially when you wake up first thing in the morning, look at patterns in drapery. Look at shadows on the wall. And go into that state where you are receptive to seeing images. And you will begin to see all kinds of faces and trees and landscapes. Leonardo da Vinci did this. He used to go out and look at a wall which was weathered, made of bricks, covered with bird shit and all kinds of scratches and so on. And he would watch it until he saw a vast scene. He described seeing a whole battle going on. There was a Chinese Zen monk who had long hair, very unusual. And he used to drink an enormous amount of wine. And then when he was really far out, he'd dip his hair in ink and then slosh it over a piece of paper. Then he'd dry it out. And in the morning, he'd come back and look at what happened. And he'd put himself into this state of mind. And he'd begin to see a landscape. And it's fantastic when you put yourself to this, how detail after detail fits in. And all he had to do was make little touches of the brush to bring it out for everyone to see. And it looks, when we go to the caves of Lascaux and those ancient parts of France and go down and see the prehistoric paintings of animals, that it looks very much like they had followed natural formations in the stone on the wall of the cave, which had evoked their imagery of cattle that are to us inconceivably realistic for people that primitive. But we shall always find that when the artist has been following eidetic imagery and has not been trying to construct the image by himself. Because this whole world is created in that way. We're not aware of this. Because we are so accustomed to seeing it in the way that we think is real and normal. You can also train yourself to see things which haven't been seen before. This is what many artists do. For example, in the history of Western art, 700 years ago, there were no landscape painters. Everyone was a portrait painter. Or they painted scenes of the doings of human beings, angels and gods and so forth. And whenever there was landscape, it was merely incidental background. Now, in the course of time, people got fascinated with the landscape part. And they withdrew the figures and left the background. And so we got landscape painting. And the first people who saw landscape painting looked at it and said, "That's not what I call a picture." Why? Because they had seen landscape hitherto as insignificant background. And it took painters to draw people's attention to the beauty of landscape. Now, do you see what we could do, and we are only just beginning to think about, is soundscape. When we record something, or go to a concert, we have the impression that there is the thing there. And so in radio studios, they cover the walls with soundproof tile to keep out the sound of traffic. So that you have the thing. The important thing you're supposed to notice is the speech. But the odd thing is, you listen to that back in your home with the windows open. All the street noises are coming in. There's no reason why they shouldn't have been there in the first place. Well, now let's move to that. Think of soundscape. The hum that's going on behind all the things we're supposed to be doing. And you can realize it's very beautiful, just as you can see that a landscape is. The humscape, you see? And so there is become a school of musical composers, like John Cage, who treat us to background noise, or to silent concerts, in which the concert is the sound spontaneously occurring in the auditorium. Now you may say that's not music. Who knows? Well, so the world then is a humscape, is a landscape, a skyscape. And over thousands of years, important people, that means strong people, decided what was important to notice. And they told their children that that was important. We still do this because when a child is messing around and we find the child is scrubbling around and making patterns in mud, we feel that the child is doing something unimportant and say, stop that. Now learn to use a pencil. A child points at something and says, what's that? And Alice says, well, that's a table. No, that. I say it's wood. The child says, yeah, because he knows it's all wood. But I mean, that. Oh, don't be silly. That doesn't matter. So in this way, we learn the official interpretation of the cosmic Rorschach plot, which is based on, as I pointed out, certain criteria as that you must survive. It's your duty to live, see? Which is a double bind, because it says again, you are commanded to do the spontaneous. It's your duty to be spontaneous, because all life is spontaneous. So everybody is in a bind about this. But there it is, the world that we see is a creation of eidetic imagery. So wherever we select the human areas as being significant areas, and so they're called human, where the Rorschach blot is wiggling in the way that we call human wiggling, where it wiggles very much, and the worst maximal points of wiggling in our environment are other people. I mean, there are other things that wiggle. Cats wiggle, but not quite so interestingly. The wind in the trees wiggles, but again, it's more predictable. But the human wiggle is the least predictable wiggle in the total Rorschach blot around us. So we call that human. So you see that it is in that way that you have performed Maya, the world illusion. But Maya also means art and also means magic. And so the magical evocation of the world of things from the formless world, which means from the world of pure wiggle, is the creation.